Hey, this is Mike.
And I'm Tabby, and we are from the Gray's Taproom podcast. Welcome to Bleach Bros Top 50 Movies of All Time.
In this episode, the guys will rank their favorite films from number 40 all the way to 31. Now let's introduce your hosts, B-Word and Jake the Hater.
Welcome into the Bleach Brothers podcast, Top 50 Movies of All Time. Jake, this week we're talking films number 40 through 31. Now, I kind of want to recap a little bit. In our last episode, we went 50 through 41, and there was a couple movies on your list, or on my list, excuse me, that did not make your list. Notably, American History X did not make your list. What was your takeaway from my list, other than the fact that you didn't like my number 41, Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls?
I gave up on thinking of anything else once you said that, because fuck you, that's dumb. The hater in me came out. My true identity came to fruition. My true identity was born from a rhino's butthole. Okay? It flopped out of a rhino's butthole and wanted to yell Shikaka at you. And, like, what's that little angry guy that fights him when he's the white pale-faced devil or whatever? When they're wrestling.
Oh, Iquensu Ocha.
Yeah, that guy. That's what I turned into out of a rhino's butthole wanting to attack you. I gave up on everything else on your list except for now, how dare me for not putting American History X. And I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to say it's on my list later. I'm not going to do that because that's not fair. But let's forget. Let's forget about the last one. Let's get into now 40 through 31. I am very interested on your introspect on how you went about this, because we talked on the last episode that when we were doing this, we almost fell down a path. And we almost fell down a path like, oh, sci-fi. Here's another sci-fi film. Here's another sci-fi film. Or these are my childhood favorites. Or do you feel that when you first wrote this out, you had a bunch of movies that you started putting on there and a certain genre kept getting bumped?
Yeah, I do, because there was some sci-fi films as an example that I was going, oh, this sci-fi film is better than this sci-fi film. And then I just continued in that vein and started the ranking. But then as we got into, like, how does that compare to other ones? Maybe how does that compare to a dramedy, a comedy, a drama, something else, a horror? How does that compare on there? Because it's really easy for me to get into the rut and say, okay, these are the best horror films of all time, or these are the best comedies of all time, or these are the best whatever genre of all time. But I didn't want that to dictate my list. And I felt like there was a couple times that I was going, okay, we got to take these 5 movies out of this genre or this category. And then I'm going, well, wait, hold on. Is number 5 better than, this movie over here? And I think when we said it in the last episode too, I think these 2 episodes, the one in August and the one this month, are really tough for us because these were like I feel that these were the films that probably got interchanged the most. Like, these were the ones that we thought, okay, we've got to drop it down, we got to bring it up. And if you brought it up, how do you justify that it's better than, whatever the movie is that now that you're kicking down? So yeah, these were probably the hardest for me when we're talking about from 40 to 31, to be specific. I knew that there were certain movies that would make my top 50, and if you put them in the bottom 10, like, okay, they're just kind of there, right? But when they actually go from a little higher to that, specifically 40 to 31, you have to justify that the movies in 40 to 31 are better than the movies from 50 to 41, if that makes sense. And that was tough for me.
See, I'll say it this way. These were not hard for me to pick, and they weren't that hard for me to rank, because it's easier to justify, like, oh, it's 48, this one's 36, and most people aren't going to care as long as you're not making it number 5 or number 7. So the interchangeability is not the problem. But it was the fact that once I hit a certain number, though, if I ranked, like, when I started writing this, because I did it backwards. I don't know if you did it the same way as me. Like, I wrote 1 through 10. I already knew those. And then I started from 50 and went up. And when I started hitting like 24 and stuff, and then I'd look back on my list going, yeah, that was 41. How the fuck is that 24? Something like that. I did run into those little issues. I will say, though, for this block, these are the easiest to justify and argue. These are the easiest to convince people, like, it's my top 50. I think there's more leeway I get. Like I said, I think the hardest is going to be when you start to get to your top 15 of people thinking, you really think this is a top 15 movie of all time? Those are going to be the bigger arguments. And so I'll just start it. My number 40 is a sci-fi film. It's one of the ones I didn't watch till later in life. It was made before, or it was made about a year after I was born, and it was The Fly from 1986, starring
Good
Jeff
movie.
Goldblum and Gina Davis. Great film, great prosthetics, great creature feature, great storyline. I mean, it's been over and overly done. It's one of those ones. It's almost like, what is it? It's one of the main monsters of Universal, essentially, in the sense of like those old school storylines. When you'd buy the old books and stuff, there was always that story. But great acting. And I loved everything about it. It was really what opened my eyes to what sci-fi could be as a kid. And so that's why it made my number 40.
That's a good one. I didn't make my list, but I know that that's one of your favorite movies of all time. Again, I can justify that knowing who you are and knowing what your list is. That number 40 is probably a good ranking for that. I'm interested to see what the remainder of your block is here. What picks 39 through 31 are, because we very well may have some criticism for each other. But my number 40 was one of these films that I didn't have on my list originally, and after we recorded the last episode, you and I took some time and I told you what the animated films were that I was going to originally have on my list. This one and a number of other movies actually came to the forefront where I could justify that these were better than those animated films. But I didn't have this on my list originally. This is a 1989 sports fantasy drama film based on the novel Shoeless Joe. It's Field of Dreams, starring Kevin Costner. You've got Ray Liotta in it. You've got James Earl Jones. There's Amy Madigan. There's a great cast in this. This one was hard because the last category that I had that I was going through movies was sports films. Where do I rank sports films in general? And I know that you and I have talked about sports films before, but in theory, we've always talked about what's your best baseball film, or what's your best football film, or what's your best basketball film. Field of Dreams is a great film. I could watch this over and over and over again, and I have watched this over and over and over again. Makes my list at number 40. I think it's one of Kevin Costner's best performances, although I will argue that at his age now, Yellowstone's a really good performance for him, but that's not a film. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought James Earl Jones was a great character in this as well. Loved how they were able to incorporate baseball. Loved how they were able to incorporate real characters. And I just really enjoyed that.
Me being the asshole, I could say Draft Day could have made my list, but it didn't. So I'll save everybody that heartbreak and tear. I'm mad I don't have as many sports films as I thought. I almost want to make it its own fucking list, as you're sort of pointing out, right? It's like, give me baseball films, let me rank those. Give me football films, let me rank those. Because I start to feel like too, and I mean, you can argue this with anything. You can say comedies are comedies and sci-fi is sci-fi and formulaic is formulaic, but it's a good movie. You and I have had this argument forever. No, Dad, I don't want to go have a catch. I don't think it's the best baseball movie ever. I also don't think it's Kevin Costner's best baseball film. The one I say people give me shit for, and I don't even care. And it didn't make my list, and that's For Love of the Game. I love that, but that's also because I was a pitcher, and I felt more into that mindset, and I enjoy that movie more. But Field of Dreams, if you're putting it in a top 50, great pick. Great pick, especially for you, especially for where it's at. It's almost like the kudos you gave me for The Fly being 40. That's a great number 40 for you, because I could see you trying to put this in the top 20, and I think you would have a harder time justifying that, because the flaws that come with that film and everything else. But I'll give you that. I agree with you. The funny thing is, as I said, I like For Love of the Game more. But if I was going to rank for top 50 all time, I'm probably putting that movie on here instead of my own pick. Hence why neither of them made it, which is, it's a weird quandary, right? Did you find yourself at times going, I love like this movie, but I know this is a better overall film? Because there are times like I like a sequel or something, knowing it's not the better film, Ace Ventura 2, that, you really think like this is the better of the two for your own selfish purposes. But if you were doing a ranking, you're like, there's no way I could put it above the original or whatever. Did you find yourself doing that as well?
Yeah, specifically. So my number 50 pick in the last episode was Remember the Titans. I think Invincible is actually a better movie with Mark Wahlberg. And I don't think that it's a better movie as far as like comparatively. That's why it didn't make my list, Invincible, that being. But I can watch Invincible a lot more than I can watch Remember the Titans, just because I think that it is a better movie. However, when I go into performances, when I go into the storyline, the story arc, all of the struggles that the characters have, I do think that Remember the Titans is a higher ranked film just generically than Invincible is, but I could watch Invincible more. So that's one of those that I have a hard time trying to justify. If I can move forward here, I'm going to go with number 39. Number 39 is a film that, it was just a fun watch. It is the Coen brothers. They have some really weird films that come out. This is a 2007 crime thriller film starring Javier Bardem, Tommy Lee Jones, Josh Brolin, No Country for Old Men. If you want to talk about a murder movie, like this dude is just like creepy in how he murders people, and he just murders people to murder them. And I just thought it was a great performance. I think that Javier Bardem, Tommy Lee Jones, Josh Brolin, I think that they're great actors on their own. But to have this ensemble cast, if you will, to create this storyline of No Country for Old Men, and then bring in the success and the thought process and the writing that the Coen brothers have, I just thought it was really, really well done. And that's why it makes my list.
That is a great pick, because it was one of those ones where I looked at and it kept popping up on like great films. And it's like, yeah, but I can't argue for it. There's other films I can, but I totally see why. It's also one of those ones where it felt like the directors finally got to a level, not that the Coen brothers weren't already doing stuff, but like where they had such a star-studded cast and they wrote every role perfectly and casted perfectly and had everything come together for that movie. So I'd say, yeah, it's probably one of their best films ever. Doesn't make mine, but I love that pick. I love that pick. My next one's childhood nostalgia strikes again. One that we've talked about in nauseum growing up, but The Goonies, 1985. I mean, what else can you say about this film? I went to visit the house up here. Hey, you guys! I mean, there's so much you can quote from the fucking film. It was the quintessential film for us growing up, essentially. I mean, you had a handful. Were you watching The Mighty Ducks? Were you watching The Sandlot? Were you watching The Goonies? And, out of all of them, I always went to The Goonies. I could watch that over and over again. It is awesome to see some of the people that came from that and then continued on forward. It's also awesome to see Corey Feldman now do his music from that star-studded performance breakout role as Mouth. But it's just one of those. It's that feel good. I could always watch it, and it doesn't matter how old I get. I can still enjoy that film. I can enjoy it with my kids. I can show it off, and so it was probably one of the only ones that had to make my list for that reason.
So you didn't like my other Jim Carrey film. So I decided that I would add another Jim Carrey film. Now, granted, I didn't just decide because my list is locked in. 2004 American romantic science fiction drama called The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I think that The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a phenomenal film.
Kudos to you. I did not expect you to even have that on your fucking radar, B-word. How proud I am at this moment, because that is a Jake style film. That is a Jake style film,
dude,
and I'm so happy it makes it up there.
You've got Jim Carrey, Kate Winslet, Kirsten Dunst, Mark Ruffalo, Elijah Wood, Tom Wilkinson. Just a great film. It's all that emo stuff, which if you look at the 2004, that was kind of the emo craze, right? And so I love this film. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of Jim Carrey's best films, period. Spoiler, it's not Jim Carrey's best film on my list, but I will say it's fantastic as far as how it goes. So yeah, that's my number 38, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
I love that pick. I love that pick so much. I love it that I want to forget it, just like what would happen in the movie, because I didn't put it on my list. I can go back and rewrite my list. It makes me feel bad inside, though, so that's probably why. My next one's just a feel-good, probably one of the newest movies on my list. Just a feel-good movie. I had such a good time with it, I couldn't leave it off. I found myself rewatching this movie over and over lately, and it's Bullet Train.
It's a great movie.
I just had fucking fun. It was one of those things, like, I went to the theater just with some bro friends thinking, okay, I'm just going to go watch this. And then I walked out going, holy shit, I have not had that much fun in the longest time in a theater without having to think like, how is this connected in a Marvel universe? What is going on here? Why do I not like that casting? Like, I went into it with no expectations and walked out with like the most gratifying experience that I've watched it multiple times. And I loved the acting. I loved the character arcs. I loved how different it was. The action was awesome. And it was like, essentially, you're on a fucking train. You're going from point A to point B on the train. Here's the movie. You're going from point A to point B. There's a few twists and turns, but other than that, just shoot people, have fun, kill, and have a fucking blast. And I did. And I did have a fucking blast. I know you've liked that film. We've talked about it a little bit. Like I said, I think it's probably one of the newest ones on my list out of everything. But I couldn't get enough of this movie. And so I had to put it as 38.
Honestly, it's a great movie. What did not make my list? I love everything about Bullet Train. As a matter of fact, when I saw Bullet Train, I think I actually told you have to go see this film, and it turned out it was a great film. Didn't make my list, but I can't fault you for it, dude. That is a good thing right there. So my number 37. So you know how we talked about how we're going into a vein of films or a vein of directors or a vein of genres. I was in the Coen brothers vein when I was doing this. So my number 37 is actually the 1996 black comedy film Fargo. What made me think about this film, to be candid with you, is that when we were a couple months ago, when we were on the Gray's Taproom podcast trying to cast for House of the Dragon, Mike and I came up with Frances McDormand as one of the characters. And Frances McDormand is actually in this film. So is William H. Macy, Steve Buscemi, some others. And I remember when this movie first came out, I didn't understand it. And that's one of those quandaries, right? What is going on here? But as I've grown older, I appreciate this film so much. I don't think that the FX TV series even gives this film justice. I think it's taken a different spin on it, which is fine. Creativity to their own. But the 1996 film Fargo is one of my favorite films of all time, obviously. It was very well done. The Coen brothers are very good. And that was in that vein that I was in because, as we just talked about, No Country for Old Men, here we go with Fargo. I was able to kind of justify where these would fit in, and so that's why I chose that.
That's a great pick. It was also a great pick for your House of Dragon casting. Do you feel that is the best Coen brothers film overall? And I don't want to spoil your list if you have more later, but is it?
I don't think I have any more. So yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and just say that is the best Coen brothers film of all time. Okay.
That's how they really, really got started, right? That was their big breakout, if I'm not mistaken.
That was their big break. Well, actually, their big break, if I remember correctly, I think it was There's Something About Mary. I think that was a Coen brothers film with Ben Stiller and Cameron Diaz. But as far as their type of, when you think Coen brothers, you think of this like weird
Burn After Reading, like, Big Lebowski, like
you think of and so I would say that Fargo's probably the best. I would go probably Fargo, No Country for Old Men, Big Lebowski if it were up to me.
See, I think we're tomato potato on that. It's mine is Big Lebowski, Fargo, No Country for Old Men. I'm a Lebowski fan. It's just one of those I like dark comedies. I just enjoyed the comedy on that one a little more than Fargo. I thought Fargo was funny, but not that it went over my head. But I think also just watching it for the first time, I think it sometimes comes down to what did you watch first? I watched Lebowski before I watched Fargo, and so I think there's that whole stand with it. Mine is actually a comedy next, and not dark in the same way as yours, but more just in the sense of it's fucking raunchy, gratuitous, and just is what it is. We have talked about this film a lot. It is essentially, as I have said before, Me and You, and it is Superbad from 2007. I know it was written by Seth Rogen in high school. I can't remember who wrote it with him, but talk about perfect casting. Talk about how we felt growing up. It was better than American Pie. I think American Pie was our breakout. Yeah. Like, we're finally going to be adults soon. We're going to be graduating high school. This is what we're looking forward to. And then Superbad came out. And like I said, we graduated 2003, 2007, 4 years later. But it's like, that was me, like, at the end of high school, like how I was trying to figure shit out. And I relate more to that movie than American Pie, I guess. And so it just, for me, great fucking film. Had to put it as 37. I could not leave it off my list.
If you heard a loud noise, that was me throwing my pen because this is the first time that you're coming up with a film that I should have in my top 50 that is not in my top 50. I didn't even think about it, to be candid with you. It was not even one of the ones that came across on my list. I'm so disappointed in that. Great pick, dude. That Superbad is a phenomenal movie. Yeah, good on you. That's your number 36, you said?
That's 37 for me. That's number
37.
37. I mean, that it's one of those ones like where we're at. It's like, oh, it's 34 to 37, whatever, but it is 37 just based on for continuity. But dude, yeah, it's one of the best. Like I said, it was funny. Like the last episode when we were talking about greatest comedies of all time, and I said Hangover makes the list. Like Superbad makes a ton of people's lists now of like one of the best ones ever. And I think for our generation, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's written perfectly. It's
Yeah,
quotable. There's so much to remember about that film.
It's done very, very well. My number 36 very well could be a lot higher on your list if you have it on your list. I would venture to guess that it is probably on your list and is probably within your top 20, if I were to guess. I went with Alien. So Alien came out in, 79? It's a science fiction horror film directed by Ridley Scott. And it just, I mean, phenomenal cast. Tom Skerritt, Sigourney Weaver. You had John Hurt in there. One of the, I mean, as far as like science fiction goes, I don't know that I can't say that this movie wasn't perfect. Like it was just done very, very well. And so that being the case, Alien makes my number 36. I know that Alien is a big film that you enjoy, that we've talked about this ad nauseum. So talk to me about where it's ranked on my list. Should it be higher? Should it be lower, in your opinion? And we'll go from there.
It should be way higher. I think it gets lower for people because more people consider it a sci-fi film than a horror film. But I mean, if you, and as I will spoil, it's pretty high on my list in the sense that and you are correct, because it is one of the most important films to me, because I think it did so much with so little. Like it almost felt like Jaws in the sense like you didn't get to see the villain, if it were the alien, for almost the whole film, and it wasn't because of practical problems or anything. It was great writing, and it made you involved in every little aspect of it. The funny thing was, and I was holding my paper up, I have part of the Alien franchise as my 36, and it's the movie Prometheus. And I am the biggest Prometheus defender. I think it's actually a well-done film. Does it have its own problems? Yeah, that's why it's not as high on my list. But especially if you watch, I don't know if you've ever watched the director's cut version where there's the TED Talk in the beginning. I will ask you this challenge, B-word, and please go do it. But if you can find it on YouTube, you don't even have to watch the whole movie. But if you go look up the TED Talk before Prometheus and watch that and tell me if it would have made you feel a little differently about the film. It's so well done, and it was tying into, how they do those things now where it like ties into real life, like essentially a TED Talk, right, of where Wayne-Utani Corporation was doing. It's one of the coolest little moments, but I enjoy Prometheus for what it was. I thought it was beautiful. Yes, were there dumb moments, but here's the thing. Like any horror movie, there's always stupid girls getting killed for no reason, or the guy who's like, oh, I'm just going to go check the back room. The same thing have to happen. Like, you can't have everybody be fucking smart. And let's also be real that if you were on an alien planet, you were a scientific nerd like that and really trying to study something, you're meaning to tell me you're going to run away from every little thing? No, you're going to go try to study. That's how people die. That's how people get in stupid submarines and go to the bottom of the ocean because they can't get enough of looking at the Titanic on a stupid movie and they die. Okay? Those things happen. But I found it hilarious that your 36 and my 36 are sort of in the same vein, both by Ridley Scott. Both the same like franchise, no joke. And I said, I showed you my paper to show you because we wrote these in and did it. But I love me some Prometheus. I love that film. I like how it tied together. I like the whole ancient alien theory. And it's beautifully shot. And I mean, that's a cop out compared to Alien, because if you look at Alien, how it was shot, I think it was on 16 millimeter, or
I think it was, yeah.
And it makes sense because it's supposed to be like cameras in space. The hardest thing I ever have is when you do prequels later in life, like in our generation now, where the ships and stuff look better than the ones in the original. And how do you explain that? Like, that's the thing that pisses me off the most about that franchise. But besides the point, that's my 36. Before we get to the next 5, I think we should take a little break, and then we'll come back with your next thought.
Hey guys, this is B Word here at the Bleach Brothers podcast. Just a friendly reminder that we are sponsored by Jerky Pro. And if you are a fan of jerky, make sure to go to www.jerky.pro. Use code BleachBros5 at checkout to get yourself a little bit of a discount. Both Jake and I are huge fans of jerky, and Jake working in the beef industry and me being just a fellow fat kid, we absolutely swear by Jerky Pro. You will not miss out by ordering Jerky Pro. Do not let some of the sticker shock you. There are free shipping options, multiple flavors, etc., so forth. If you do order Jerky Pro, make sure to use code BleachBros5 at checkout.
Your dog is cute, your kids are adorable, and your cat really does look good in that tutu. But there's only so many times you can talk about how cool velociraptors are, or how much you want to rub that fuzzy belly. How about a podcast with extraordinary people and scintillating conversation? It's the Derek Duvall Show. Find it at DerekDuvallShow.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. And no, I will not be attending your cat's quinceañera.
Welcome back to the Bleach Bros Top 50 Movies of All Time. This is your host, B Word, here with my co-host, Jake the Hater. And I don't like saying that I'm a host and a co-host because it doesn't make us feel like equals. Like we are co-hosts of this
We're
thing.
not. No.
But if I tell people what I am, no, you're the talent and I do everything. So that's what we do here.
Yeah.
So that's why we're not equals. However,
that's better.
However, here's what I will tell you. You have the Goonies on your list. Now, you talked about 3 movies, The Mighty Ducks, The Goonies, The Sandlot. The Mighty Ducks are not on my list. However, The Sandlot makes my list. I have The Sandlot at number 35. The Sandlot is a film that I watched over and over and over and over and over and over again for years. As a matter of fact, I'll still watch it today if it's on TV. I have the DVD. I have the Blu-ray. I have all of those. I love The Sandlot. I love everything about The Sandlot. You have to think this movie came out in 1993, I believe. It was written as a sports comedy, but I do think that it's actually more of a coming-of-age sports dramedy, if you want to take it that way. I love the casting. All the kids were perfect for their roles. I love how it's narrated. I know that you and I talked about the Wonder Years and the narration of it all, and you have yet to watch the Wonder Years, which at this point I've probably ruined the Wonder Years for you. However, that A Christmas Story, all that sort of stuff, with the narration on there, I thought that this is perfect because it puts you into the mind of the protagonist and it really makes you understand where they're feeling, understand their thoughts, all of that. Love The Sandlot. I will always love The Sandlot. So yeah, The Sandlot, number 35 on my list. I cannot praise this movie enough. I would love to see that it's higher, but the problem is that there's so many good movies that I can't rank it above.
I'm glad you ranked it there because I'm sure like if you tried to rank it in the top 10, I'd be like, really, B Word? I mean, I understand you've watched it a billion times. And I know the answer to this, but I still want to ask. So as I said, I put Sandlot, Mighty Ducks, and Goonies, and I presume out of those 3, you're always going to pick Sandlot over the 2. If you had to rank them, it would go Sandlot, 100%. Goonies, Mighty Ducks. What other 2 films, let's make it a top 5, what other 2 are you throwing in there as the childhood nostalgia must-have films of our generation?
Okay, so I'd have to look back and see when the movie came out because I may have been a little older than I was with those movies, but Little Rascals would be one set of movies. Pick. Yeah. And if that was a little older, then I would go with Heavyweights.
That's a good, I don't think of that one. Yeah.
Yeah. But then as far as the other one goes, I'd probably go with Little Giants.
See, I'm going Little Giants over Little Rascals. And the funny thing is, Theory of 2, I'm a Camp Nowhere kid compared to Heavyweights. I loved Camp Nowhere. It's one of those ones, almost same sort of vein, but it's like, that is a Theory of 2. I don't know if they came out the same year, but like if I was renting, that's the one I'm going towards over Heavyweights. The other one for me, I guess, would be The Addams Family.
See, but I was always the fat kid.
Yeah. That's part of it, but no, the other one for me is actually The Addams Family, which I think is an off the wall one, but I felt like that was a film that we all watched and we remembered and quoted and went about. But off that, My 35, 1989 Batman.
Oh,
Michael Keaton Batman,
okay.
the film that started it for me. I did not put a ton of superhero movies on here, but it's one of the ones that got it started for me. I remember my dad bought this VHS because he was a huge Batman fan, and my mom just never wanted me to watch it because I remember walking into the room and trying to grab it when I was like 4, because that's when it came out. And she'd be like, "Oh, you can watch that when you're older," and I would sneak it and watch it. So it was one of those nostalgic films for me. I didn't understand it at the time at that age, but it's the movie. It's one of the Batman films. And so it's just, and he is the best hero to screen, in my opinion, out of all heroes, but it still doesn't make the top 10.
Interesting. I do not have Batman 1989 on my list. Not a bad movie at all, by the way. Cannot criticize you for having that on your list. I guess where I'm at, I do have a handful of comic book movies that made my list, which actually surprised me. It might not surprise, our fans or our audience here that's listening to us because we do talk so much about that. But I think that for 1989 Batman specifically, I love that film. Like, I love everything about that film. I just think that there is a better Batman film that's out there. And so that's why it just didn't make my list. It wasn't one or the other. It wasn't one of those ones that I had to choose one or the other. I just couldn't rank it higher than some of these films. So that was your number 35 was 1989 Batman, correct?
Yes.
What's your number 34?
Clerks.
Fuck, I didn't even think of Clerks.
It was that movie where I felt pretentious for the first time in my life, in the sense of like, I'm watching a black and white film. I'm so smart. It's a Kevin Smith film through and through, and he was actually doing good work, in my opinion. It's the start of everything he did, even though it was not the first film I watched by him. There were other ones that I watched first, and then I went back and finally found Clerks and watched it. But I don't know, there's something about it that made you feel smart in comedy, if that makes sense. Like even in between the scenes where he just has big words, and I don't remember what they all are, but you know what I mean, to like introduce the scene. It's quotable. Yeah. It's fun. It's got rememberable characters. I mean, they've made they made tons of spinoffs from it, from View Askew's universe, and then 3 films of its own for the Clerks universe. But I mean, just a great film. It's witty, it's fun, it's low budget, it's everything I want in a movie. And it's one of those ones I'm never disappointed when it's on. And so I don't know. I had to put it there. I could not put it higher, but it had to make at least in my top 50. So it's number 34.
I like that pick. I didn't think of Clerks at all. If I were to rank Clerks, though, I think it would be closer to probably in that first 10 of the movies that we did in the last episode. Just because I don't think I would rank it as high as you did, but it is a great film for sure. No criticism, though. It is a great film. I mean, you want to talk about spawning a multiverse, if you will, or a film universe. That was one of the original film universes that was out there. So that's a good one. That's a good one. So my number 34 is a 2007 period drama. It's directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring Daniel Day-Lewis as a silver miner. It is There Will Be Blood. Daniel Day-Lewis is one of my favorite actors. He's only been in really a handful. I mean, he's been in more than a handful of films, but there's really only a handful of films that you can think about him in that are just magnificent. And this one, I think, is his best. Daniel Day-Lewis puts on a great performance in this film. Daniel Day-Lewis's acting style being that he's a method actor, you can really see him delve into the character in any movie that he's in. And in this movie in particular, he embodied the character. He did such a bang-up job with this. But even removing Daniel Day-Lewis from it, it was a phenomenal casting of everybody in here, from Paul Dano to Dylan Frazier. You had Paul Thomas Anderson as the director, and I think that that's probably his best film that he's directed. This actually was not my first introduction to Daniel Day-Lewis, but it is my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis film. Disappointed he's retired, disappointed he's no longer in acting, but when you look at how his method acting happened and the toll it took on him to try to get out of that character, I can definitely understand why he doesn't want to act anymore. one of my favorite films of all time. So that's my pick here.
I agree with that. I love him as an actor. I think he kills every role he's in. My type of movie, very slow burn, takes its time. It's quiet and loud enough at the same time. Sort of like Oppenheimer, right? Where you have that like loud violins and shit at the right times. Can't fault that at all. So happy it made your top 50. I didn't even think that was going to hit your radar, to be honest. Not that I don't think you're a fan of that movie or anything, or Daniel Day-Lewis. I know you are, but I was just surprised to hear that one on your list. My next one, I got to go back to my sci-fi roots. It was a different style of films that have been being done, but it was District 9 by Blomkamp. I love District 9. I love District 9. I thought it was clever. I thought it was great. I like the storyline. I love everything about that movie because it's back to that moral aspect of like, how would you treat, it's got more meanings behind it than anything. And it gave me that sci-fi bug, no pun intended, that I want to have and scratch that itch, but also because it was like in that vein, almost like Blair Witch or something, where it's like, it's found footage, it's documentary style, but not really. And I just liked how it was different. I liked that it was different. And it's one of those ones, I own it on Blu-ray. I watched a lot. I've been waiting for the sequel for fucking ever. I don't think it'll ever happen. If it does, it's going to be like Avatar, where I'm not going to give a fuck anymore. But if it's on B-Word, I got to watch it. I have to watch it. I have to continue it. I just love that fucking movie. So I had to put it there. And I know it's surprising to you that how high it is. And like, but it's one of those ones, like when I was looking through, I was like, I know it's going to make my list. Where? And it ended up to land around there. And like I said, I'm happy it's in the bottom 20 if it were, right. I don't want to make it higher, but I still had to put it on my list.
Okay. Yeah, not a fan. I don't like the movie. I know why it's a movie that you like. I just don't like the movie. I went and saw District 9 in the theater, and like I had thoughts about walking out. It was almost like trying to, and I realized it's not the same thing, but it was like trying to watch Sweeney Todd all over again. I was like, what the fuck
I love
is
Sweeney
going on
Todd.
here? It's just, yeah, not a fan, but
okay.
No, I hate Sweeney Todd. Sweeney Todd is one of the worst movies ever. So we introduce in pick number 33 here my first comic book movie, if you will.
Okay.
Came out in 2014. It is a Marvel film. You and I've talked about this film ad nauseum. We both love this film, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. The reason why this film makes my list is, number one, I think that you can watch this film standalone, whether you're a comic book fan or not, and you can be entertained by it. It's a storyline that you can follow. It moves you with the relationship between Captain America and Bucky. You also have the espionage aspect with S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything going on between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra. It offers the science fiction part of it for those that like science fiction. It offers the drama part of it for those people that like dramas. It's done very, very well. This film is one of those comic book films that I cannot find a fault in. I mean, we can find faults in it, of course, but as far as the way that it was done, I cannot find a fault in. This is the Russo brothers' first delve into the Marvel universe, and you can tell in the manner how they did Captain America: Winter Soldier, and then looking at the other properties that they did with Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, how they just continued to grow off of that. And it just really, I think for me, got my attention for them as directors. And I thought that they did a phenomenal job, just an absolute bang up job. And I think it's important for people to be able to watch the film without knowing anything about it, because you're going to have non-fans come to the table and say, okay, here's X, Y, and Z, or here's X, Y, and Z. And then they're going to ask us, hey, what happened there? What happened there? And this was a film that nobody had to ask you what happened. I think it's a great film. One of my favorite espionage films, just in general, if we're going to take that genre. So Captain America: Winter Soldier takes my number spot right there.
I'm surprised it's this low. I was waiting for you to name it because I knew out of all of them, you were going to name this film eventually. I don't know if other Marvel films have made it. I mean, don't spoil it, but I mean, in the sense of like, you won't give them away, but are there other Marvel films on this list for one?
Yes.
Okay. But 2, I knew it was going to come up, and I knew it's one of your favorites of all time, which is funny. I actually left it off. I thought I was going to have this on my list, and it was like one of those ones that almost made like if we did the honorable mentions like we always do. But I don't love it as much as you. And I think it's probably one of the best films you can watch out of all the Marvel, like the MCU for the first, the first phases that we went through. Great film, great pick, great acting. I agree with you. People can come in, watch it, and they don't have to feel like they've watched everything else to know it. I can't fault that. I'm just surprised it's as low as it is because that's your 32, correct?
No, it's my 33.
33, sorry.
And if we're talking about comic book movies, I have a handful or so that are better, in my opinion, than Captain America: Winter Soldier. But as we get into those, you'll understand why.
Yeah.
But Captain America as a standalone, again, it's a sequel. It's one of the sequels that's on my list. I think it's better than Captain America: The First Avenger.
I'll agree with that.
Captain America: The Winter Soldier is just a great film, and that's why it makes number 33. You've already given your 33, correct?
I did. I was going to say, just give me your 32 then, and then I'll give you mine because I'm interested now, especially if you have a comic book movie so low.
So my 32 is Dumb and Dumber. Again, Jim Carrey is not.
For fuck's sake. Get the fuck out.
You don't think that Dumb and Dumber is a top 50 film?
No.
Dumb and Dumber is better than The Hangover.
That's debatable. I think it's fun.
Yeah. Caught you there, didn't I, fucker?
Fuck you.
Dumb and Dumber is the best buddy comedy that's out there. I don't know that there's a better buddy comedy.
Super bad.
Oh, okay, yeah, but again, I didn't have that one on my list, so fault me there. But again, Dumb and Dumber is first off, I think it's Jim Carrey's best movie. Jeff Daniels is great in it. The storyline is so stupid, it's funny. You have just random things that are happening. The little kid petting a bird when he's blind and the bird is dead is probably one of the most funny, like bad things that rooted my humor into what it is today. Dumb and Dumber is just phenomenal. I don't have a qualm with Dumb and Dumber at all. I think it's
I don't
a great
really
film.
either.
I think it's a better film than Captain America: Winter Soldier.
I guess here's the thing, and this is me being the hater again. So when we originally brought up doing this episode and the top 100 or top 50 or however we were going to do it, I remember talking to my neighbor who's a listener to the show, Dan the Man, and he's like, "Oh, well, I would be interested in what your top movies of all time are." And I was like, "Really?" And so we started talking on his back porch, and I was like, "Well, what?" And he goes, "Well, I'm not really a movie guy." And I'm like, "Okay." Well, I was like, "Well, what's your favorite movie of all time?" And he went Dumb and Dumber. And so I think just because I heard that opinion once, that he thinks that's the greatest movie of all time, and he's not a movie buff, I went, it's never going to make any list I have now. It'll never make I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. And I'm over here talking shit on you, which I'm more messing with you than anything because it is a good film. I don't think it's better than The Hangover. I understand your points. I think it's quotable. I think it's fun. I think it's a quintessential comedy for us. But like I said, when my neighbor said that's his top movie of all time for his life, my brain shut off. I got angry and red. And I just thought, how could anybody have that opinion? And so I'm also amazed how many Jim Carrey movies you have, because I know you're not really a fan of his. And that's besides other points and stuff. But I mean, do you feel like it's just because of who he became, or were you just, I like the artist and I don't care about anything else?
I like older Jim Carrey films. I think when you start getting into his newer Jim Carrey films, there's an issue. The one Jim Carrey film that was close to making my top 50 that didn't is The Truman Show. But I do think that when you start talking about Jim Carrey films, I think The Truman Show, for me, is less than Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, is less than Dumb and Dumber, and is less than Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So for me, Dumb and Dumber is Jim Carrey's best film.
Okay. See, if we did a top 100, I think I would have a ton of Jim Carrey films. But since we don't, I had to nix him on most, which I found surprising. And there were a few actors that I nixed that I'm going, holy shit, how did I do that? Because another notable example is Robin Williams. And we've talked about Robin Williams to nauseum on here. Huge fans. And I found myself not putting a lot of his films or any on my list, going, how? How did I do that? Because I'm such a huge fan. And so did you find yourself doing that with some of the actors or anything we've ever talked about, just in whether it's on the show or not, just me and you in private, like where it's like, how did I leave this person off?
Yeah, there were a few actors that I didn't have them in there. Um, I love Nicolas Cage. I mean, but I just couldn't justify any of his movies in my top 50. So spoiler alert on that. But there's some other actors that are, didn't make my list. One of the movies that I had on my top 50 originally that didn't make my top 50 was Interview with a Vampire. And that was my only Brad Pitt movie. Now, you talked about Bullet Train. There's also Legends of the Fall that I just never really got into, but you could probably argue that that's probably one of his better movies. So he left my list. There's other actresses that didn't make my list either that I love. And I love
Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Yeah, Jennifer Love Hewitt. Well, I love her boobs. I love her boobies. But yeah, I mean, just for me, it was hard to leave certain actors and actresses off of the list, and I am excited for you to, as we continue this down, because I do have some actors on my list and some movies on my list that you don't have. And I know likewise that you have some that I don't have. And so I'm curious as we go into our next episodes, how this is going to actually work out and then where these are going to be ranked and if we're actually going to have any regrets. Because as my list sits now, the only regret that I really sit back and go, okay, I have a regret is Superbad. But everything else that we've talked about so far, I'm comfortable. Like I'm willing to die on a hill for my list.
I'm willing to die on a hill. I do have, I think, a little more regrets than you do in the sense like you're naming some good films, but also like I sat there and tried to argue with myself to put certain things on there. And for an example, a Godzilla movie. I don't have one on here, and there's a few reasons why. I think the newest ones are like the closest you're going to come to actually make a big blockbuster, make more people go and watch it and enjoy it. But I don't think they're amazing films. But I also can't sit here and tell you like Godzilla versus Kong from 1971 is a fucking spectacular film and can make top 50. Because at that point, you can kick me out. I mean, I know I'm going to put some bullshit on here and it's more for me. But like, if I could, like my favorite Godzilla film was Godzilla versus Megalon. But it's not like a great fucking movie. Like it's cheeky and bad and like, a quintessential Godzilla creature feature. And so I'm not going to sit here and die on a hill that way either and go, it's one of the best because it's not for me. I can watch it all day. I can watch it all day and people can come over and think I'm weird and I'll watch it dubbed. I'll watch it with subtitles. I don't care, but I'm also going to be realistic here. And so that's the thing where it's like, I have regrets, but I don't. Like I had a regret that I wasn't able to put a Godzilla film on my list because I love all those films so much. But in reality, I'm sitting here going, Godzilla 2014 would have been probably the closest, and it's still not that great of a movie. I mean, you kill Bryan Cranston off instantly out of the get-go. And I mean, I know it made the story propel forward, but then you went, yeah, this movie doesn't really give a fuck about human characters, but then it tries to give a fuck about human characters. 32 is going to open up to how I view movies. And you know how I view things. Like I like an ending like real life, like downtrodden, terrible fucking that, but also just the fact like just misery. And it's a Requiem for a Dream. I love that movie so much. I know it makes people feel like sick inside about heroin. Darren Aronofsky is one of my favorite directors. I love the way he makes people cringe and think about things. I loved how it followed different people's stories. Jennifer Connelly, all them, like how they went down the roads of like, okay, how's this mother going to handle a heroin addict son while she's getting addicted to pills herself because she wants to fit in a stupid dress for this imaginary show she's going to go on or was going to go on. How is this person, you know what I mean? I loved, and then at the end, there's no good ending. There's no good ending for everybody. It's just a fucking downtrodden, like you're going to die. You're going to have your arm cut off. You're going to be doing anal to anal with another chick just to get money. Like great film, great score, great direction. Like they did a good job with that movie. And so it had to make my top 50.
That's more of a you movie than a me movie. I like the movie. Don't get me wrong, but I can definitely see where you like the movie a lot more than I like the movie. I think Jared Leto did a phenomenal job in that film. I think Jared Leto's an underrated actor. I mean, I say underrated because I think that when we're talking about greatest actors of all time, he doesn't even come close to the list for most people. But he's very, very, very talented. Jennifer Connelly, as you said, I've had a crush on Jennifer Connelly since Labyrinth. I'm just gonna be flat honest with you.
Yeah.
She is delightful, and yeah, good movie. I can see how it makes your top 50. I can also see how your personality is more with that. I think the closest thing that I have to that movie is The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, to be candid with you, just because those movies, granted, they don't have the same topics, but I kind of feel like they both came out right about the same time. They both deal with pretty heavy topics, all of that sort of stuff. So in the last episode, you revealed your number one in this block of movies. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal my number one in this block of movies. So number 31, not number one. I don't want to confuse you here, Jacob.
I didn't reveal 31.
No, you revealed 41 in the last one first.
Gotcha. I'm sorry.
So in
I was
this
lost.
one, I'm going to go
confused.
ahead and reveal my 31 and allow you to finish it up. And this is also how we know, how these episodes go behind the scenes. So for my number 31, I love this movie so much. I think that this is really where we start to get into me having to make some hard decisions with how to rank films. Movie came out in 1993. It's a Western. The Western stars Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton. Funny story here. Billy Bob Thornton was actually in the film. I didn't know that until later on. The movie is Tombstone. Tombstone is my favorite Western of all time. Tombstone
Agreed.
is one of the first Westerns that I watched that wasn't a spaghetti Western, which is when we talked about Clint Eastwood before in this panel of movies. I think that Clint Eastwood is a good actor when it comes into Westerns. I think that John Wayne is a good actor when it comes into Westerns, but they had their own style. They had their own Western stuff. You know what I mean? Tombstone, to me, brought it into this big explosion type, big conflict. The score was great. The acting was great. Val Kilmer's best role is Doc Holliday. Kurt Russell nailed it as Wyatt Earp. This was just done so well. The chemistry between all the actors was fantastic. The storyline was good. This is a movie that I can watch and pick out issues with it, but I don't care.
Yeah.
Because I just think that it was done very,
it.
very well. Yeah. So Tombstone for me is going to round out my picks for this episode. So my number 31 is Tombstone.
That's a great pick. I agree too. That's back to best Westerns ever. You could argue that all day, especially for people in our age range. I think it's the go-to one for them. You have a star-studded cast. You have great writing. There are things you can nitpick about it, but at the end of the day, great movie overall. My 31 also ends on a down note, and I remember when I went to the theaters to watch this, I left in awe and the most confused I ever was. Like, how do they go forward from here? It is part of the MCU. It is my favorite one of all of them, and it's Infinity War. Makes 31. And the reason is, as I remember when the snap happened and everybody turned to dust, I sat there going, how the fuck do you fix this? Where do we go from here? What's going to happen? And you had no clue. And I just remember how silent the theater was. And it was one of the best feelings ever. One, everybody died and it was glorious. Two, I looked around and everybody in the theater had the same expression, like, what the fuck just happened? And it is rare that you have a movie do that to so many people, that everybody was so invested. I remember for the next fucking year, B-Word, me and you were looking online for everything that we could find, where the Russo brothers were releasing shit, like a photo of a behind the scenes thing, like, guess the name of the movie. And we're all sitting there like debating what shadows mean and who's going to be in it and what is this photon cannon and what is canon and where it's going and how they're going to bring them back and how this ties in. And it's so well written and so well done and changed so much for me of what I expected with a film. Like I said, my 32 was Requiem for a Dream, and I expected a downtrodden end. Like this did it in a way where I was like, I know there's a continuation. I don't know how. And I racked.
This was our Empire Strikes Back. We've talked about that.
Yeah, and I just sat there like, I cannot wait. I cannot wait for the next one just to finish this up. Not even if I care if it's going to be better or not. It's just the fact that I need an answer, and I usually don't care if I get an answer. I usually don't care if you give me a cliffhanger. I usually don't care if you tie the end of the rope. And it was just, it had to make my top 50. It was number 31 for me because I had a hard time also not putting comic book films in the top 10 because I think there are better films out there than them. But it's such an amazing flick.
You asked me on the last episode if I think that they can capture magic in a bottle for a particular movie or a series of movies. They did that for Infinity War and Endgame, where they trapped the actors into filming those two films back to back. So I was wrong in a sense that couldn't be done again. When we're talking about an entire series being filmed, obviously Lord of the Rings goes for that, but good pick, man. I wish we had more time to discuss, because as we get into the next list, I think we're going to find some commonalities, but I also think that we're going to find some personality traits that are very different from one another on these lists. So I'm excited to be able to record this with you, and we'll do this again, and it'll come out again next month. So our August and September for the top 50 movies of all time are now available for you with this episode. Our October episode will be out the third week of October, and that will deal with movies 30 through 21. With that, Jake, what do you got for me?
I don't have anything except thanks for all the dirty talk, and come back and get sanitized. This is Jake from the Bleach Bros podcast, and thank you for listening to today's episode. I want to bring to your attention our Linktree. Visit Linktree/Bleach Bros podcast for access to all of our socials, merch, and streaming sites. Linktree is linktr.ee/Bleach Bros podcast, all one word. And if you enjoy our content, make sure to give us a like, give us a review on whatever platform you are listening on, and also invite your friends.